What is the most broken card in the Yu-Gi-Oh anime? Some cards were so powerful that they made the rules pointless. Forget Paw of Greed or Blue Eyes White Dragon, the anime had spells that let you search your entire deck, traps that prevented your opponent from playing the game, to even win conditions that could never exist in real life. So today we're counting down 7 of the most broken Yu-Gi-Oh anime cards that were so overpowered they could never make it to the real life game. Starting with a classic that you all might actually remember, being Multiply, specifically in Duelist Kingdom. All it did was let you infinitely divide any monster you controlled that had under 500 attack, an infinite amount of times. Do I really need to say why this card is broken? But the card's effect implies that you could have used it on a monster that had been debuffed to under 500 attack, so you could even do something like temporarily debuffing Blue Eyes to under 500 attack, and then use Multiply on it to summon an infinite amount of Blue Eyes. And it's not like using it on a random weak monster with 0 attack was even a bad idea. You basically just created an indestructible wall that couldn't be dealt with in any way. Even the later use of Multiply on Kribo was broken in Battle City, as it still created a wall of Kribos that the opponent couldn't handle and couldn't run over. Multiply along with Kribo lets you form a 2-card combo to infinitely stall your opponent. That isn't susceptible to any form of removal, results in any decks that relied on stalling, such as Burn or Exodia, becoming the most annoying decks to deal with in the meta. Stalling isn't the only thing you could use this card for, while the anime never really clarified this either, but theoretically you could abuse the infinite Kribos for other use cases, not just as a wall. I mean, opportunities are kind of endless. You quite literally have an infinite number of Kribos to use. For starters, you could summon an entire board of high link monsters like Garlode or Top Logic Bomber Dragon. With a single tuner of any level below 10, you can make a Baron de Fleur. There's countless ways you could use the fact that you have an infinite number of monsters on your side of the board to break the game, and that's why Kribo and Multiply deserve their spot on this list. It is a bit hard to use considering it's a 2-card combo, so that's why it's being placed at number 7. This next one might seem kind of underwhelming, especially if you're familiar with the real life version of the card, with this card being Magical Mallet. But the anime version of this card is simply a normal spell where you can add this card and any number of cards from your hand to the deck and shuffle it. Then draw the same number of cards you added to the deck. The real life version of Magical Mallet has rarely seen play for one seemingly small difference. Magical Mallet gets sent to the grave after being used and you don't draw a new card to replace it. This difference results in you going -1, which means that anytime you activate Magical Mallet, you end up with 1 less card. Essentially, the real life Magical Mallet causes you to go -1, which means that with any hand that contains Magical Mallet, you essentially have 1 less card. It also means that in most cases, where even if you do have a bad hand, you'd rather have a Magical Mallet be a different card that you could actually use. And what's even worse is that the -1 doesn't guarantee anything. You're still essentially throwing away a card for a chance to get a better hand. But in anime, this card doesn't have this problem. Not only does it replace itself, so there's literally no risk to even running it, the broken part comes from how it returns itself to the deck. So just run 3 of these, and guess what? You could in theory just keep on reshuffling your hand over and over again until you craft a perfect hand, as there would always be 3 copies of Magical Mallet in the deck at all times, as it sends itself back to the deck, and so you could just reactivate Magical Mallet over and over again, sending any cards you don't need back to the deck. It's also guaranteed to never be a brick, as even if you draw it later on in the game, you could just activate it by itself to swap it with a different card from the deck. For context, if it were in a real life game, it would be an instant free of in every deck, as literally every deck would benefit from being able to shuffle any useless cards back into it. Another aspect of Magical Mallet is that it's known as a mulligan, which traditionally other TCGs actually have them inbuilt into their rule set, which might make you think that Magical Mallet would work in Yu-Gi-Oh! The key difference comes from how Yu-Gi-Oh! Has no resource system, which leads to existence of degenerate first turn kill decks, as you can exhaust your entire hand in 1 turn. A key downside many of these decks have is that they're incredibly inconsistent, but with the presence of something like Magical Mallet, it would suddenly shoot up, and all these decks would become tier 1 overnight. In Duel Links, they even had a form of a mulligan in the skill which became the most overpowered ability in the game, and had to be nerfed so severely that the modern version of the effect decreases the number of cards in your hand by 1, and then you can't special summon or activate monster effects until the end of your first turn. However, there is a very big weakness with this card that's not necessarily within the power of the card itself, but another common hand trap that's played in Yu-Gi-Oh! Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom can be discarded to negate any effect that adds a card from your deck to your hand. So in the case that you send your entire hand to draw 5 new cards, and your opponent uses Ash Blossom on you, well, there's not really much coming back from that. For this card in 5th place, this next card is kind of a weird one. Being the Golden Castle Castle of Stromberg, as the effect as it was used in the anime never showed its real effect, as its effect got hacked and altered by Siegfried, which gave us this monstrosity of a card. So its original effect probably was a lot weaker before it got hacked, but regardless, we'll be going over the card as it was used in a duel against Yugi. Golden Castle of Stromberg is a field spell with the following effects. During each of your standby phases, send half of the cards in your deck to the grave. If you cannot, destroy this card. Once per turn during your main phase 1, special summon one random level 4 or lower monster from your deck in face-up attack position. You cannot normal or set monsters. All monsters special summoned by this card's effect, and all monsters your opponent controls must attack if able. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, destroy that monster and inflict damage to your opponent equal to half of that monster's attack. This card cannot be destroyed by the effects of other spells, traps, or effect monsters. And as if this card can get any more hilariously over the top, your opponent must pay this card's maintenance cost. So within one singular spell card, we have a card that lets you special summon any level 4 or lower monster from your deck. All monsters on the field must attack if able, but your opponent's monsters get destroyed and they lose life points, and you basically can't remove it unless you banish it. Oh, and your opponent just loses half the cards in their deck every turn. This card gives Ra a run for its money with the amount of BS effects that are stacked upon this card. This card is so stacked that even just 2 of any of these effects would make it incredibly broken. Like the ability to special summon any level 4 or lower monster from your deck already would make it a potent first turn kill enabler, or make it a 1-card combo starter for most decks. And even if your opponent disrupts your combo, Stromberg also protects you from your opponent building a board, as they can't summon anything without fear of it blowing up in their face and it getting destroyed. This card would single-handedly force everyone to run multiple copies of spell removal cards that deal with Stromberg, like Giant Grenade or Cosmic Cyclone. Like the other cards in this video, it's also incredibly generic, so most decks would be forced to run it, with everything from the casual to high tier competitive decks. The only real downside to this card is with how modern Yu-Gi-Oh is, you'd actually would rather have the maintenance cost of sending half the cards from your deck to the grave to be yours, rather than your opponent's, since it's more of an upside now with how so many monster effects get activated when they're sent to the grave. I mean, a spell card now literally did the same thing, that Grass Looks Greener, which got banned or limited in basically every format of Yu-Gi-Oh that exists, and you're just handing this effect to your opponent every turn. Still though, the upsides still outweigh the downsides, as you could still send important cards your opponent needs to the grave, and even with a graveyard based deck, sending half of the cards in the deck, even in just 2 turns, cuts the deck size from 40 to 10, which renders many archetype combos dead, with how many plays require specific monsters to be in your deck. Unfortunately, despite its game breaking effects, it is at least feasibly countered, as there are a couple ways to get rid of it. It can still be banished from the field or sent back to the hand, which you can accomplish relatively easily, or you can do it the way Yugi accomplished by leaving a single card left in your deck, which forces Golden Castle of Stromberg to self-destruct. It still is an instant game-breaking ban if it was ever released, as it was in the anime, but unlike the higher placing cards in this list, it's a lot more reasonably countered, and yes, it's not even as game-breaking as the cards further up, which is why I'm giving it the 5th spot on our list today. By the way, if you're currently enjoying the video, why not subscribe to the channel? It helps me a lot and lets me know this is the kind of content that you want to watch. For this next card, we'll be leaving the older era of dual monsters and GX into 5Ds, with the 4th card on our list being 100 Eyes Dragon, which is a Dark Synchro card with 3000 attack and 2500 defense, with a level of -8. In order to special summon this card, you subtract the level of a Dark Tuna monster from the level of one other monster you control. The value must equal the level of this card. This card gains the effects of all dark monsters in your grave, and when it is destroyed and sent to the grave, select one card from your deck and add it to your hand. There's an argument that this card honestly could be in contention for the strongest monster ever to exist in the entirety of Yu-Gi-Oh, anime or real life. And that's because if you think of any effect the strongest monster you could think of has, there's probably a similar dark monster effect that could be given to 100 Eyes Dragon. What I'm trying to get at is that this card's potential is limitless. Having it be unaffected by other card effects would make it powerful by itself, but when you mix and match other effects in conjunction, makes it absurdly broken. There's so many combos you could think of with just 2 or 3 monsters that would be an instant win for your game. You could go for the Unstoppable Tower variant where you use Quintet Magician, Blackwing Full Armor Master, and Blackwing Armor Master, and you get a monster that cannot be destroyed by battle, is unaffected by other card effects, and also cannot be tributed, which basically means you can't get it off of the field. You could go for the 1-card Floodgate variant where you have a Vanity's Fiend, Ultimate Falcon, and Destiny Hero Plasma, giving you a card that is unaffected by other effects, whilst also stopping monster effects and prevents special summoning. It's also relatively easy to summon, assuming Dark Tuners also come to the real game, as it requires any Dark Tuner, along with any monster where the difference in levels equals to 8. It also makes Foolish Burial incredibly broken alongside it. It translates to essentially choose what effect you'd like to give this card, and you want to know the craziest part of the card. Since it doesn't copy names, just the card effects, if you're to copy a card effect where the once per turn clause refers to the card's name, like Predaplant Verta Anaconda, then theoretically you'd be able to spam out the effect over and over again, as the once per turn clause applies to Predaplant Verta Anaconda, not 100 Eyes Dragon. To get an idea of this in context of the real game, a very similar card, Tyrant Neptune, got banned because of certain exploit, as its effect let steal the ability of the monster attributed, such as Lyrilusk Independent Nightingale, which made it a monster with 5000 attack, become unaffected by card effects, and deal 5000 burn damage each turn. And the 100 Eyes Dragon is just that, but with every dark monster in their grave. And then cherry on top, for whatever reason, if you somehow manage to screw up the game by not winning, it also lets you search for any, and I mean any card from your deck, and add it to your hand. What was the reason for even needing to add this? Was the fact that this card was game breaking not enough? It also has quite literally the best possible form of searching. Moving on to the card in third place on our list, we'll be talking about something a bit more recognizable, that being the Winged Dragon of Ra. And this is the third time I'll be talking about this card, so check out these videos after. But this card is the epitome of a card that could only exist in the anime. It has so many effects that there's no way Marek wasn't just making up stuff every duel. And even if you did put all the effects onto a card, this is what the card text box would look like. So we'll just go over its effect, and bear with me, there's a lot to go over. It takes 3 tributes to normal summon. If special summon, return it to the graveyard during the end phase, and when summoned, cards and effects cannot be activated. Okay, so this card's text is enough to make an entire video on, and some of these effects are debated because of anime shenanigans. But at the very least, we have a card that is unaffected by your opponent's cards, gains an insane amount of attack, can attack when it's special summoned, ignoring a phase, which is an insane effect and is bound to cause a whole host of ruling problems, and as a quick effect can also pay 1000 life points to destroy all monsters your opponent controls. In a real life game, this card would be what is called a Towers, which is coined after the use of Apocryphal Towers, a monster with high stats and was unaffected by most cards. The term got extended to being applied to any monster that was also hard to remove off the field with high attack. They were such a threat to deal with because many towers would be incredibly hard to get rid of, with their protection effects and high attack, but they fell off the meta as time went on, due to the presence of kaijus, which would invalidate boss monster protection effects, as they worked by using opponent's monster as tribute fodder and then got summoned to the opponent's field. But the Winged Dragon of Ra doesn't have this problem due to its anti-tribute effect. With the protection effects that Ra had in anime, bringing it to the real life game would make it unstoppable, and it's also incredibly generic, so any deck could run it, as long as it could provide for free tributes on board, meaning it could be a meta contender even in today's game. Hell, there's even many engines that you could splash into a deck that easily gets bodies out onto the board, which let you get free tributes for Ra without using your normal summon. The only way to deal with it is by running it over, but even then that's going to prove to be difficult, when, you know, it gains at minimum 7900 attack with its life point gain effect. And that's without considering it gains the attack of the monsters you tributed. Okay, so for a runner-up in second place is Chaos End Ruler, Ruler of the Beginning and End, a level 10 light warrior monster with 3500 attack and 2000 defense, where it cannot be normal summoned or set. Must first be special summoned from your hand by banishing 1 light warrior type and 1 dark fiend from your graveyard, and when special summoned, cards and effects cannot be activated. You can pay 1000 life points, banish all cards from your opponent's hand, field and graveyard, then inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each card banished by this effect. So the context for this card is that it was shown in the anime as part of an exclusive legendary deck that was considered one of the most powerful cards in the entire existence of the anime, but it was never shown to be played, and we still don't know the other cards in the deck. Even so, the original Japanese episode of the show did reveal the card's effect, so we could make out the card's stats along with the abilities. For starters, it's clearly a reference to the 2 other Envoy cards, Black Cluster Soldier and Chaos Emperor Dragon. You can't actually use the 2 monsters to summon it, given that you require Dark Fiend to be banished. But onto the actual card, Chaos Chaos End Ruler reads like a custom card that a child would conceive of when smashing your two favorite toys together. Its summoning effect is pretty easy, even if a bit specific. It won't be easily splashable, but it'll make any deck that can run it downright broken. It coincidentally manages to slot in nicely with Burning Abyss, as the majority of the archetype are Dark Fiend monsters. Along with Dante being a Light Fiend would probably make it relevant. I mean, it's not hard to see how a card like this would be broken. You're making a card that by most metrics, an objective upgrade of a card that has been banned for longer than some of the people watching this video. But if we look at its actual effect, you can't even respond to its summon, so no Solemn Judgment or Torrential Tribute. Its removal effect is by far the best thing about it, as it doesn't target, it banishes and also removes the cards from your opponent's hand. On turn 1, you can just invalidate your opponent from playing the game, and on top of that, as if losing every single card in your hand, field and grave wasn't enough, you also add an extra 500 damage on top for every card banished, and it's not even once per turn. The best decks that would find success in this new meta with this card introduced would just be Chaos End Ruler Turbo, with every game now being in a rush to summon this card turn 1. The only way to counter this card would be with hand traps, but more than likely any decks would run anti-hand trap cards like Called by the Grave or Prohibition, as securing the removal effect basically just translates to you win the game. And then on to our final card, and you might be thinking, what kind of card is more powerful? Man, quite literally a god card. Well, what about a card that doesn't let you play the game? For our most broken card on our list, we have Beastborg Medal of the Crimson Chain. In case you've never heard of what this card is, it came from a one-off duel in Arc 5 from the Beastborg archetype. Beastborgs are pretty unremarkable in themselves, with the archetype being a fusion-based one, where you continuously fusion summon monsters over and over again, and inflicting burn damage in the process, with the Beastborg Medal trap cards supporting fusion monsters, either by debuffing the enemy or boosting your Beastborg cards. But what does Crimson Chain actually do? Well, it's a continuous trap where if you control no Beastborg monsters, destroy this card. Once, if a monster is special summoned from an extra deck to your opponent's field, you can target one of those monsters. It cannot attack and change its battle position, or be destroyed by battle. The targeted monster's controller cannot normal or special summon monsters or activate spell trap cards. This card probably takes the cake for being the best stun card of all time. Mistake Mine who? Skill Drain who? It essentially shuts down an opponent from playing the game, as if we look at the 3 card types you play in the main deck, you have monsters, spells and traps. Crimson Chain stops, well, monsters, spells and traps. The first effect prevents the monsters from even attacking or changing its battle position, so you can't even hope to run over their monster if your existing monsters are already on the field. So quite literally the only action you have available to you is to activate the effects of monsters that already exist on your field, or potentially any graveyard effects. It really is a Mystic Mine pumped on steroids, even going so far as to pretend that there's an out to the card by having an inbuilt destruction effect, which is impossible to make happen considering you won't have any cards to force the opponent to have no Beastborg monsters. Even within the context of the duel this card came from, the way it was beaten was completely absurd. It appeared in a duel featuring Barrett against Yuya, where the card was destroyed, not through Yuya's wits or clever dueling skills, but because a third party had came in and destroyed all of Barrett's sponsors, causing Crimson Chain's destruction effect to occur. But before that, Yuya was getting his ass beat back to front, where his turns consisted of doing literally nothing but drawing and passing. And if Sergei hadn't come in, then Yuya would have objectively lost with no way to counter the card. I mean, how do you even out it? Remember, I'm talking about how good the card is alone, but what if you used it alongside a skill drain? That's a 2-card combo which completely prevents you from playing the game at all. And in the anime it was stuck in a completely mediocre archetype. But what if you plop this card down on a board with any Beastborg monster and just played Burn Stall? Throw Barrett with this card in a duel against Yu-Gi-Oh! And Kaiba, and I can tell you who wins 10 times out of 10. And so, in my personal opinion, Beastborg Medal of the Crimson Chain takes the cake for an anime card that would quite literally break the real life game. Those aren't only broken cards that appeared in anime though. In fact, Seto Kaiba's deck is full of broken cards that I didn't even cover in this video, and some you might not even have heard of before. So make sure to watch this video where I talk about the cards in Kaiba's deck if you want to find out what they were.